Hello, Bethanians. Welcome once again to Bethany Virtual Cafe. And this week, the story is about a great saint for most Filipinos, as it is our first Filipino martyred saint. And so, as I narrate his story, I'd like us to focus on certain aspects of his life leading to his martyrdom and some points that maybe we can learn from him. Well, they say that martyrdom is the easiest way to sainthood. But of course, we all know that it is not easy being a martyr. And so this Sunday, I'd like us to learn from the saints, and may his life truly lead us to healing, or may his life give us some comforting words and also learning experience that could help us in our journey as a Christian. Lorenzo was born in Manila of a Chinese father and a Filipino mother, both Christians. Thus, he learned Chinese and Tagalog from them and Spanish from the Dominicans whom he served as altar boy and sacristan. He became a professional calligrapher, transcribing documents in beautiful penmanship. He was a full member of the Confraternity of the Most Holy Rosary under the Dominican auspices. He married and had 2 sons and a daughter. First, in this narration, we can learn that San Lorenzo Ruiz came from a biracial family, a Chinese and Filipino. And so knowing this, we can say that San Lorenzo Ruiz lived in not a very typical family, but a family that is raised by 2 different races, and yet he was brought up as a Catholic. And it is wonderful to note because faith, of course, is very important. And for all we know, parents are always encouraged to bring up their children to the faith. The significance of faith in the family is something that we have to understand and nurture at a very young age. Lorenzo's life took an abrupt turn when he was accused of murder. Noting nothing further is known except the statement of 2 Dominicans that he was sought by the authorities on account of a homicide to which he was present or which was attributed to him. So this was such a great accusation to San Lorenzo Ruiz, which could even cost his life. And so he has to do something in order to keep himself safe, away from the dangers of being put in prison or maybe even killed by death penalty. At the time, 3 Dominican priests, Antonio Gonzalez, Guillermo Cortet, and Miguel de Auzaraza, were about to sail to Japan in spite of a violent persecution there. With them was a Japanese priest, Vicente Giwazuka de la Cruz, and a layman named Lazarus, a leper. Lorenzo, having taken asylum with them, was allowed to accompany them. But only when they were at sea did he learn that they were going to Japan. So the irony of the story is that he was trying to escape himself away from getting imprisoned or maybe killed and the consequences of murder. And yet here he is being put in a place of persecution, which he only realized later on. So they landed at Okinawa. Lorenzo could have gone on to Formosa, but he reported, "I decided to stay with the fathers because the Spaniards would hang me there." In Japan, they were soon found out, arrested, and taken to Nagasaki. The sight of wholesale bloodshed when the atomic bomb was dropped had known tragedy before. The 50,000 Catholics who once lived there were dispersed or killed by persecution, which could eventually also cost his life. Now, they went through some really horrendous and terrible torture. They were subjected to an unspeakable kind of torture. So after huge quantities of water were forced down their throats, they were made to lie down. Long boards were placed on their stomachs and guards then stepped on the ends of the boards, forcing the water to spurt violently from mouth, nose, and ears. Would you imagine that? The superior, Father Gonzalez, died after some days. Both Father Shiwazuka and Lazarus broke under torture, which included the insertion of bamboo needles under their fingernails. But both were brought back to courage by their companions. So these were the terrible and horrendous tortures that Lorenzo's companions went through. And of course, if he is also to subject himself to the same faith by not denying his faith and by keeping with his faith, he will also experience the same. And probably the torture may even be worse than those of the fathers. Interestingly, however, San Lorenzo Ruiz gave in not to give up his faith, but rather gave in to stand for his faith and for God. And so, in his moment of crisis, he asked the interpreter, "I would like to know if by apostatizing, they will spare my life." The interpreter was non-committal, but in the ensuing hours, Lorenzo felt his faith grow strong. He became bold, even audacious, with his interrogators. So see, you can see here the shift from trying to save his life by giving up his faith to someone who's truly standing by his faith and believing in the power that God would grant him as well as his companions. This is a test of faith, a test of courage, as well as a test of martyrdom. So if San Lorenzo Ruiz may have been able to escape from this, then probably this wouldn't have happened. He may not become a saint, a martyred saint, but because he was strong enough to hold on to his faith and to hold on to Christ, he was then blessed with the greatness of saintly and martyred life. The 5 were put to death by being hanged upside down in pits. Boards fitted with semi-circular holes were fitted around their waists and stones put on top to increase the pressure. They were tightly bound to slow circulation and prevent a speedy death. Well, that is what torture is all about. They made sure that you die slowly and that you could feel the pain, the gruesome pain out of the methods of torture. So they were tightly bound. They were allowed to hang for 3 days. By that time, Lorenzo and Lazarus were dead. Still alive, the 3 priests were then beheaded. In 1987, Pope John Paul II canonized the 6 and 10 others, Asians and Europeans, men and women, who spread the faith in the Philippines, Formosa, and Japan. Lorenzo Ruiz is the first canonized Filipino martyr. The liturgical feast of Saint Lorenzo Ruiz and companions is September 28. Well, we all know that San Lorenzo Ruiz is the first martyred saint of the Philippines. But years after, he was also followed by another great saint in the name of San Pedro Calungsod. My dear brothers and sisters, dear Bethanians, it is not easy to die for the faith. It is not easy to sacrifice one's life for Jesus, for God. But we all know that if we do so, we'll be blessed by God. If we do so, though martyred we become, we can also become heroes for other people. We stand by God. We stand with God. He is with us. In the time of our weaknesses, there is strength in God. In the time of our weaknesses, God surely come to our lives. So, dear Bethanians, this week, may we come to learn a lesson from this great saint, San Lorenzo Ruiz. A lesson which tells us that the blood of the saints, of the martyrs, is the seed of Christianity. May we also become inspiration to other people. If not inspired by martyrs, may we be inspired by the greatness of the people who has come before us, who has shed and offered their lives for God, who has shed and offer themselves for the greater glory, not of themselves, but that of God. God bless us, Bethanians. For our symbol this week, commemorating and remembering the great saint San Lorenzo Ruiz, it would be the color red. Why the color red? We use the liturgical color red to commemorate the martyrs, especially the saints who have offered their lives for God. And how important is this? Well, martyr, from the Latin word martyr, martyres, which means witness. Witness to whom? Of course, witness to God, witness to Christ. May the color red remind us not only of fire, not only of blood, but may it remind us to become witnesses. We can always become witnesses by our lives, by walking the talk, by walking the Word of God. And such is the life of San Lorenzo Ruiz and other martyrs. Their lives are true witnesses of who God is. Their lives are true witnesses of what God could be for us. Their lives are witnesses of the infinite and the unceasing love of God for all of us. So, dear Bethanians, may we ask the help and the intercession of San Lorenzo Ruiz and all the martyred saints, that through their intercession, we too may become worthy witnesses of God. Till next time, Bethanians, and God bless us all.